I've got hopefully a few minutes to do this short video just on regarding nut throwers question. Can you make an unbacked backwards bow? If you don't know what a backwards bow is, you're gonna learn. Anyway, let's just go through like the basics, the quick ones. Growth ring bows. Peel the bark off, leave the bark on. In some cases, mountain maple, you can just leave the bark on and you're good to go. Working down to the heartwood, if it's mulberry or Osage orange, or red elm. I always work red elm down to the heartwood. But then we get into the decrowned and the crown, decrowned and the decrowned crowned. Is where you have a very small round. You cut a tiny tree and it's going to have a huge round back. I mean, it's going to be humped like nobody's business. And what can you do? You can flatten it off, making sure all the lines are just tip to tip, nice and even. But I would do that in a way, just rounding it back a little bit. From a bow engineering standpoint, I believe that if you have a slight crown to your bow, you're going to be better. You're going to have a better bow. You could take Osage orange, for example, and just have an exact pure rectangular cross section, but Osage orange is such a great bow wood. Whatever, you don't need to crown it, but with the white woods and stuff, you will have an advantage with a crowned back. Now I think I just explained it. Oh, how do you get away with it? Look at that. Board bow, bias ring. All you do is like have two board bows glued together in opposite orientation, so you see that it makes perfect sense that you can have a decrown bow and it works. We've mastered all that stuff. Backwards bow and back to decrown bow. You can make a decrown bow and there's absolutely no reason why you can't get away with it. Why can't you just make a backwards bow then? Well, there's a difference that I believe goes on here that may or may not be true, but I believe it is. You've got the growth rings like this. This is the back up top. You've got the growth rings like this. I believe that in this case, the pressure, the forces from pulling it back are working to pull the growth rings apart. In this case, they're working to push them together. And so you've got a whole new action happening here on the back of the bow, which obviously with sinew, you're fixing everything, but we're talking unbacked. Now, is that a concern? Well, it's a function of some things. It's a function of the bend radius. A short bow with a relatively long draw length will have a more severe bend radius. More pressure trying to like pop those growth rings apart, causing issues. The weight of the bow. You've got a long bow, relatively small bend or relatively mild bend radius, moderately weighted. You can get away with a lot. You can have like violated rings on a light, long bow with a relatively minor bend radius. But we're talking in the realm of a nice length, not excessively long. We want to have some power behind it. You can cure these ills of any potential growth ring separation or fracturing or damage that you can't see visually by using woods that have interlocking grain. They can cure a great deal of evils, as far as what's going on within the fibers of that wood. And some woods that have interlocking grain, hickory is one of them, and the elms, red elm, American elm, rock elm, for example. But what is interlocking grain? Drawing connections here. This might have to do with that weird thing that happens with elm. You just cut a green elm tree and you split it into staves, the little pie-shaped sections. Each one is going to be a beautiful bow, but when they dry, they twist like heck. Connections. Interlocking grain could also be called, I'm being kind of like wild with my definitions here. woven grain, interlocking grain, woven grain, because it has to do with spiraling grain around the tree trunk. This growth ring is going this way, and then this growth ring is going this way, and this is going this way. It's a weird deal. It also gives kind of a feathery appearance to the wood when you quarter saw it. But why wouldn't hickory, there's so many whys, and some of these whys I don't have answers for. Why wouldn't hickory operate the same way? You can say, well, I've splitted a mile of hickory in my day, green, and it doesn't propeller twist like to ridiculous amounts like elm. Well, I'm not saying that spiraling is the same pattern in hickory as it is in the elms, but it does explain to some extent, maybe total extent, why you take elm and you split it and it propeller twists and you've just ruined a stave, because it doesn't respond to heat, dry heat or steam heat like Osage would or oak. Osage dry heat, oak and ash steam and boiling. You know, so you can alleviate that by taking that elm tree. If it's big, you just run a chainsaw lengthwise, figure out where you want your bows to be. Maybe there's a grouping of bad knots here, so you just run right through the knots to the center. You don't cut it in half, you just run it to the center, so when it dries, it opens up and it keeps kind of a stableness to that wood. It's not going to propeller twist when you have a full round and it's just split to the center. It just opens up and dries, and after it's dried, then you can split it into smaller bits to make bows out of. And I believe I've answered, oh, I left a part out. You've got a clean round, and you split it right down the center. Want to make a backwards bow? You're better off than if you took it to your blanket. I'm so tired. You take it to your bandsaw, because you might think you're looking at your backwards bow, the back of it, and you have lines. You see the heartwood, and then you see the later growth rings going out in straight lines tip to tip, and you patted yourself on the back. The lines are straight. That means my fibers are unbroken. Oh, but it is so easy with the sawn ones to get step along the back, and that's bad news, especially if you're going for a higher weight, more severely bent bow when you draw it back. So there's some pitfalls to backwards bows, but all in all, it's worth investing in. Now the stave I'm working on, almost to a T, has to be a backwards bow. It's going to be sinew back, so if I've got steps, whatever, I'm good to go. But it has to be a backwards bow, because I've got this ugly knot that it's middle limb, which is the worst spot, that if it was a standard bow would be on the edge of the back. On the back. Sinew would cure it. Put a little extra sinew over there, but I don't like that. I would much rather have a backwards bow with the back of the bow just having nice little knots in it than having some big old ugly protuberance on the edge of the back. And so, yes, the wood is telling me how to make that bow. I don't want to talk too long. Thank you for listening. I hope I answered questions or created questions. That's in many cases as good as answering questions, because now you're going to think about it. Am I right or wrong about there's a pressure for the growth rings to pull apart on a backwards bow if it's unbacked? Or is it just a matter of every time I do it, it fails? Was it because I had steps that I wasn't able to see because it's such a fine detail on the back? I don't know.